Serious people who have killed another person, accidentally or on purpose. What happened? 1995. Was living with my druggy mother and sister who was 4 years older than me. My mom worked at a bar, and as a 7-year-old kid lived half my time in that bar. We did have a house that more of a shed on lot that was converted into a house. Well, my mom got close with one of the patrons who also drank a lot and did drugs. Well, one day she broke up with him, I guess, and he kept coming over threatening her. A few days later she gets a call from him. Not sure what was said, but she tries to hurry us into the back room, where we kept our clothes. She attempts to hide us all under the clothes, but I start freaking out, and try to leave the house. As I get to the front door, a trucker pulls in. I stop and hear him get out, screaming for my mother. He tries to get in the door at first and fails. I'm about 3 feet to the side of the front door. He shoots at the door. I freak and jump on the top of the couch that is right next to the door, while also grabbing my T-ball bat. He kicks and kicks at the door and it finally opens. He walks in, and I POW'd him right in the forehead. He instantly goes out. I scream and my mom finally comes out with my sister and we both leave, then call the police at the bar. That same night I went to go live with my father permanently as my mother had arrest warrants. I didn't know until I was about 16 that he had ended up dying in the hospital between my concussion and alcohol poisoning. I don't feel bad about it though. In '76 I was 6 years old. My grandpa was my best friend and my hero. He always wore stripped bib overalls, so I had to have matching ones. I'd sit on his lap and we'd eat Cheetos and watch Zorro. We'd also play a silly game, pulling hair out of each other's arm. We were wrestling around one day, and I hit him in the nose with my head, and it started to bleed so badly that he ended up in the hospital. He died 2 days later. I was always told that I remembered it wrong, and I had nothing to do with it. Last year I was at my uncle's, another man who I greatly admired. I knew he would tell me the truth, so I asked him. He pretty much said I remembered it correctly. Grandpa was taking blood thinners and the hospital never really got the bleeding stopped, and he basically choked to death. Before anyone says my uncle was an asshole for telling me this, I'm grateful to finally know the truth. I know I'm late to this, so there's no chance it gets seen, but I need to get this out there. I'm 22 now. This happened when I was 19, and I still think about it almost every day. From the time I was really young, 4 or 5 probably, my dad had kidney problems. He was on dialysis for a while, got a transplant that lasted for a good few years, and then back to dialysis. The last stint on dialysis lasted 10 years. He finally decided he was in too much agony to continue treatment. He came home with the plans to live his last few days in the comfort of his home surrounded with loved ones. Fast forward 2 weeks, which is a long time to survive without dialysis for those who aren't aware. Dad's health was going downhill fast. All the symptoms of the end stages of uremic poisoning. We knew the inevitable was going to happen, and probably very soon. He was gasping for air with every breath. To this day it's the hardest thing I've ever witnessed. Hospice had provided comfort drugs for the end stages, namely concentrated liquid morphine. I couldn't stand to see the strongest man I've ever known struggle anymore, so I loaded 2 syringes with morphine and put them under his tongue. I know it was the poison in his body. I know it was the sickness. I know he was suffering, and I made the right decision. But I also have to live with the fact that I know the dose of morphine I administered was what ended it all for him. It's not easy knowing that you technically ended your father's life. A car ran a stop sign right in front of me one night when I was heading back from a friend's house. I drilled it going at about 50 miles per hour. Everything went dark, and when I came to I was facing the opposite way on the other side of the road I'd been traveling down. I kicked my door open, got out, and it was the most powerful sense of depersonalization I've ever felt. I was totally out of body just standing quietly in the middle of the street on a peaceful summer night. Glass everywhere. My Ford Explorer in front of me just fucking destroyed beyond belief. I start coming to my senses and hear a car horn. I look around and realize it's coming from the car I hit, so I start sprinting as fast as I can toward it. I get up close and see that the driver's side is totally crushed, the window shattered. I look inside, and there's an elderly man face down against the steering wheel, laying on the horn, blood all over the place. To this day I can't play GTA at all because of that particular feature. I start shaking him like crazy and yelling, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" There's no response. So I pull his body back toward the car seat away from the wheel. And it's an old woman, not a man. Completely dead, face smashed up. Someone's mother and grandmother just lifeless and maimed sitting right in front of me. Most terrible image. Just totally terrifying and numbing to see something like that. I stumble down the street and up toward the closest house and knock on the door. This woman answers in her pajamas and I can't even talk straight or anything. I'm just crying hysterically at this point and finally get out that there's been a bad wreck. By this time people are pulling over and pouring into the street. I remember the emergency responders having to use the jaws of life to get her body out of the car, and then my mom showing up and seeing my car and holding her hands on her head and yelling "Oh my god" over and over as though she couldn't even grasp what had happened at all. As far as aftermath, I think about it maybe once every 3 to 4 months now. I have a ton of repressed memories from childhood/youth, and that's another one that is buried pretty deep. I don't feel a sense of guilt per se as I was obeying the speed limit and did everything I could, but I still tear up now and then thinking about some kid losing his or her grandmother that way, or someone losing their mother like that, or an old man losing his wife and best friend in such a horrible manner that late in life. I just hope she immediately passed away on impact and didn't feel any pain, didn't suffer at all. I was seeing a guy for over a year, one of those amazing people. Hilarious, works with kids, takes care of family. I loved him. He was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. He had about 2 years to live. Lots of headaches, seizures. He was really ashamed and fearful of being a burden. There was a surgery offered to him. It had a decent chance to give him an extra 5 to 7 years. He wasn't interested, and that broke my heart. We talked, I convinced him. He agreed to have it, and went in about a month later. He had a massive stroke during the surgery and died. He had a DNR that I didn't know about. They had to let him go. His mom vomited when she found out. I'll never be able to face his family. It's taken me years to talk about it, but I think about him every day. I'll never forgive myself for being that selfish. I was driving on a small treacherous mountain road and my brakes went out. My friend talked me through it, and I was able to stop my truck by easing into the mountainside at 55 miles per hour. The truck flipped and rolled and landed on the edge of a cliff. My friend's head was crushed during the roll. He tried to breathe, but his neck was broken. He died as I was trying to talk to him. One night I was having a party in my house, which was still half being built. Myself and a couple of my friends were having a few drinks and a couple of joints and just relaxing and having a good time. The top floor of my house had not been built yet. Actually, we had just built up a staircase to the top, and there was only a very small platform extending out from the staircase. My best friend had been helping me with all of the building and knew my house as well as I did. He later told me that we went up the stairs to take a leak off over the edge because he wanted to look at the moon and the stars. He fell. There really was nothing to stand on out there, so he stepped into darkness. My best friend survived, but he broke his back and became a paraplegic. I cried for days, but when I saw him in hospital I put on my bravest face and made lists of things that we could still do together again. He had a wife and 2 children, and for a time he stayed around and was released from hospital. I carried him on my back everywhere for months, and I felt so guilty for what had happened. One night he got sick and went back to hospital to get some tests done. I learned many years later that he got all of his other friends to conspire against me. They brought him enough drugs to the hospital for him to kill himself, and no one told me because they knew that I'd try to stop him. He committed suicide by overdose in the hospital and died peacefully, leaving behind his wife and 2 children. No note. I guess he thought we'd all understand. I have a photo of him in his hospital bed just 2 days before his suicide. This big beautiful lying smile on his face, trying to look happy. But now I know that inside he was already dead. I still haven't fully forgiven myself. I could have boarded up the doorway that lead to the top floor of my house. Now that the top floor room and balcony is finished, I still get a small chill when I walk through that doorway. I'll always miss my best friend, and I'm thankful that his son and I have such a good relationship and he doesn't blame me for what happened. Please scan your surroundings and take care of your friends, especially when you have been drinking. At the time I was a single mother. A man broke into my house in the middle of the night. I shot him on my tile entry, hit him in the eye, died on contact, bled out all over my floor. 2 years old, didn't even wake up. He had a full abduction kit in his trunk, had 2 guns and a machete on him. DA declined to press charges, and the state cleared me of any wrongdoing. I refuse the TV circuit, talking about it. Honestly, I would like it if my son did not learn about it until he was at least a teen. All I know, middle of the night and someone broke in. In Texas, he played a game he wasn't going to win. I'm a locomotive engineer. I drive trains. 13 times in my 19-year career so far, someone ended up in front of my train that didn't survive. Suicide. Poor judgment or no sense of situational awareness combined with a vehicle that takes a mile or more to stop equals death about 50% of the time in my experience. The nightmares of various incidents awaken me regularly. Pretty sure that I suffer PTSD, but if I do something about it, I will lose my job, medically disqualified. I cannot let that happen at the moment as financial ruin would result. Please, stay out of the path of my freight train. Edit. Wow, lots of comments. The railroad does offer counselors and some help, but yes, a diagnosis of PTSD would end my career. Thanks for the suggestion of self-paying for a session that I'm going to look into. Similar to the others here, I was the driver in a car crash, slid on some black ice on the freeway, spun a few times before getting T-boned by myself going full speed. Friend in the passenger seat busted up his head in the windshield. My brother behind me fractured his skull, and my best friend in the passenger side backseat died. My friends, at the time, used humor to get through things. I have a dark sense of humor, but they consistently went too far, and I ended up leaving all my close friends. 4 years after I had to go to court because of other cars that were affected by the crash, and my friend's mom was trying to sue me for more money than the $100K my insurance already paid out. I used to scream out in my sleep. I dropped out of college shortly after and attempted suicide. Much better now, but 5 years later, and I still get anxiety when it snows. 14 years old. Spent the night at my best friend's house after our hometown 4th of July celebration. Woke up in the morning to find that her mother had left us to babysit her 8-month-old sister while she, the mom, ran errands. We are painting our nails on the floor of the kitchen while the infant cruises around in her walker and hear a crash. We forgot to put the gate up and the baby fell down the stairs in her walker. 7 fucking stairs. She hit her head on the railing and died in the hospital after 3 days in the ICU. About 4 years of PTSD for me. But no one really knew I was there. My best friend was branded a baby killer. High school is tough. When I was 14, my friends and I wanted to go to the beach, so I suggested the one near my house. It was notorious for bad rips, but I just figured that we would spot them and stay away. It was about 6 p.m. when we got there, and the lifeguards had gone home. We were in knee-deep water when we felt the pull of a rip. Me and one other friend made it out, but the two that were less than a meter further out than me couldn't. For the first 5 minutes we thought that they would be fine, and that they could catch a wave in. After that we knew that there was a problem. We started looking for someone, and finally found a off-duty lifeguard 10 minutes after they were swept out. The lifeguard got aboard and was able to save one of my friends. He couldn't find the other. Her body was found later that night. If I hadn't suggested that beach, if I had been quicker to find a lifeguard, if I had spotted the rip, my best friend would still be alive. Edit. Thank you to everyone for their kind words. I've posted this before. When I was a medical student on my surgery rotation, I was in the or with only the attending surgeon. The residents on service were otherwise busy, so the attending surgeon, somewhat impatiently, decides, Fine, I'll do it with just the med student. It's a relatively straightforward case, placing a gastric tube for a patient who couldn't eat. The institution I now work at frequently does these under laparoscopic visualization, which is seen as overly cautious by some. Not me. The attending puts a scope down the patient's esophagus and I have a big needle to push toward the scope. His scope had bright light which he shines towards the skin when he's entered the stomach, and I press on the skin and see it dented on the screen, showing we are in the right place. I thought I took that exact same position and angle and introduced the needle, except it didn't show up on screen. So I pulled back, pressed again and tried again, and didn't see it. The attending grows frustrated and tells me to push the needle in deeper then. I had a twinge of concern, but eventually hugged the needle, which was several inches long. Never see it on the screen. Eventually, the resident shows up and tries as well. He introduces the needle, but never can visualize it. Eventually, he switched places with the attending, and after another try, got the needle into the stomach and we finished placing the tube. I come back after my day off to find out that that patient died from internal bleeding. One of the multiple needle pokes, or possibly a cumulative effect, had injured arteries in the abdomen, leading to them bleeding out overnight. Now, I know not to ignore that twinge, and I know that even low-risk procedures have a risk of catastrophe and always take care to mention that when consenting patients for surgery. Low risk not no risk. I harbored guilt over it throughout medical school and still had hesitation the first time I did that procedure as a resident. I was working out of town, which is pretty common in my line of work, touring with bands. We had just started a new tour with an artist, but as a crew a bunch of us had been working for several artists over the last few years. When you work these long hours, sometimes under ridiculous pressure and circumstances, and live on a tour bus, sleeping a few feet away from 11 other grown adults, one of two things happen. You just get in with it, drink away any sadness you have from being so exhausted and missing your family and friends because you haven't seen them in months, or you become incredibly close. Like a family. You're together through everything, long incredibly hard days, or experiencing the joy of something or somewhere new. On this particular tour, it was going to be a smaller group of us than the last tour. No need for a video technician. But we really liked the video technician. We had done a year or two together, and he was a really great kid. Always saw the bright side of everything. You could always count on him to have a smile on his face, no matter how many hours we had been working. Lucky for the tour, more video equipment was added, and so he came out to join us right as we were going into rehearsals for the tour. We went through a week of rehearsals, then took a ferry to Victoria from Vancouver to start the tour. First show done, we all had such a great time. A really easy first day, load in. The install went quickly, the show went off without a hitch, and we finished a few hours earlier than we expected. We went back to the hotel to get some food and have a drink. Our rooms were next to each other. It was a nice spring night. We sat outside on our adjoining balconies. He was a wine expert. He loved red wine. I had an unopened bottle of red in my room, and he had an unopened bottle of white in his room, which he knew I liked. He leaned over his railing to pass me a bottle, which I easily grabbed from him. The balconies were so close together. So I passed him the bottle of red from my room. But he slipped on the wet balcony. After this point, I have no memory of any sounds. But everyone on the tour staying on that side of the hotel heard me screaming. I saw him go over the railing. I saw him hit the side of the hotel. And I saw him land 50 feet below me. I ran to the elevator, yelled at the front desk to call 911 on my way past. But it was too late. It wouldn't have mattered. I got to him and looked into his eyes and they were lifeless. A large piece of the back of his head was a few feet from us. I held his hand and sobbed that I was sorry until a security guard pulled me off. From that day, we were a tour family, connected by the worst bond imaginable. Edit. Whoa. Thanks for the support out there folks. Felt good to write this. I've been talking about it more and more lately. And yeah, his name was Yon. He is missed every day. Throw away, because I don't want anyone I know thinking about it. When I was 5 years old my family was living on a small street of an army base. My best friend lived 2 houses down, and we would forever pick on our sisters. Mine was 4 and his was 3. One day we thought it would be fun to climb onto the carport and yell for them to try and find us, and when they did we would splash them with water from up high. Mine came and it went as planned. His sister however ran into the street and was crushed by a moving truck driving by. He just screamed. I jumped off trying to get her to wake up. Everyone in the family came outside to see what was going on, only to see me trying to shake awake this bloody mess of a little girl. My family dragged me away, and the ambulance showed up to take away the body. My friend moved away within weeks, and I didn't play outside until we moved from that house less than a year later. Years after I would drive by there just to cry. I still think about it sporadically, but I have never sought professional help for it. I was responsible for others during my time in the military, but none have ever had the same impact.